This strategic withdrawal must be executed with absolute precision, cleanly, without any emotional announcement, without justification, and without engaging in distracting emotional drama, thus rigidly adhering to the psychological blueprint of the unreadable man. You do not waste precious energy on explaining your shift. You simply and decisively adjust the frequency and the initiative of your contact, dramatically reduce the length and the emotional investment of your responses, and eliminate the desperate, instant flexibility of your schedule. This creates a state of intermittent reinforcement schedule, a powerful, well-documented psychological mechanism where the pervasive uncertainty of the reward, your attention, your time, your company, makes the very act of pursuing that reward exponentially more obsessive, compulsive, and psychologically addictive. The uncertainty forces them to dedicate far more energy to securing your attention than if it were guaranteed. When your attention is successfully rendered rare and unpredictable, people instantly cease perceiving it as an expectation and immediately start seeing it as an undeniable privilege, a high-stakes prize that must be demonstrably earned through a required higher level of sustained effort, demonstrated respect, or proven utility. The definitive moment they grasp the chilling realization that they can no longer reliably, casually have you is the moment they begin to desperately, compulsively want you and initiate the relentless pursuit. This is the application of Machiavelli's counsel on maintaining a constant, slight tension and never allowing your subjects to become complacent with your favor. You must successfully make yourself valuable by controlling the supply of your time and emotional energy, ensuring that your precious favor is only granted after a carefully calculated period of strategic distance, thereby firmly establishing that access to your company requires significant proactive effort, not merely passive, entitled consumption. The entire power dynamic shifts abruptly and decisively from you being the predictable seeker to you being the unpredictable, magnetic, high-value prize that must be sought out. Your intentional, profound silence in response to their minimal, low-effort attempt becomes a language of power far more compelling, commanding, and unforgettable than any desperate, emotional spoken plea for their time or affection. This pillar is the foundation of turning absence into a presence that dominates the internal landscape of their mind. Furthermore, this deliberate reduction of availability creates a cognitive vacuum that the human brain naturally rushes to fill with idealization. When they spend less time with you, they spend more time thinking about you, and those thoughts, fueled by the fear of loss, tend to filter out minor flaws and amplify perceived strengths, making the prize of your presence even more valuable in their estimation. Warriors of absolute command, architects of invisible influence, prepare to execute the ultimate, decisive inversion of social dynamics. For today we seize non-negotiable, total control of the one debilitating, corrosive pattern that has historically cost you more time, more irreplaceable finite energy, and more non-negotiable structural self-respect than any financial or material loss you could ever calculate. The devastating, humiliating, and entirely unstrategic act of frantically chasing external validation, ephemeral love, or common low-value attention. You have been psychologically conditioned and compelled to live under the cruel, stifling tyranny of the pursuit, operating under the naive, amateurish assumption shared only by the perpetually weak masses that consistent, exhausting effort is directly proportional to guaranteed, high-value reward, believing with crippling certainty that the harder and more desperately you run after a person, a coveted deal, or a high-stakes opportunity, the more intrinsic, undeniable value you inherently demonstrate, and consequently, the more likely you are to successfully secure and retain it. This belief is not merely a common, forgivable mistake. It is a psychological trap of the highest, most sophisticated order, deliberately designed and executed to keep your mind subservient, emotionally reactive, and perpetually begging for the low-value scraps of external affirmation. The unvarnished truth, the brutal, unyielding reality, known only to those who have mastered the cold calculus of power and human behavior, is this: the one who chases always, without exception, loses every shred of leverage, and the one who executes a strategic, disciplined retreat immediately commands the full, terrified weight of attention and pursuit. The precise moment you demonstrate a desperate, existential, and visible need for anything external, their fleeting approval, their predictable presence, their conditional affection, you instantly and often irreversibly devalue your own worth in the cold, evaluating eyes of the beholder. You transform from a dynamic, complex individual into a psychological certainty, an easily solved equation. And in the human mind, certainty breeds corrosive indifference. Machiavelli, with his relentless, singular focus on the acquisition and unyielding maintenance of control, would instantly recognize this crippling chase as a fundamental failure of personal emotional autonomy, a fatal, unstrategic act of self-betrayal and self-sabotage. He taught, through the ruthless efficacy of his collected writings, that true, sustainable power resides not in perpetual, frantic, energy-draining motion, but in strategic, immovable stillness, not in exhausting, emotional pursuit, but in impenetrable, self-contained indifference. Today, we execute the definitive psychological maneuver of the reverse chase, transforming your calculated strategic absence into a powerful, magnetic, and irresistible force, weaponizing your absolute silence into a source of desperate, consuming longing and cognitive dissonance in the minds of others. We will reveal the 3 unspoken psychological rules, the non-negotiable, granite pillars of Machiavellian indifference that surgically strip others of their casual, assumed control over your emotional state and unilaterally transfer the anxiety, the demanding effort, and the relentless burden of pursuit entirely onto them. You will learn the definitive techniques to make your presence and your attention a high-value, earned commodity, to make your precious, finite time a rare, coveted privilege, and to make your powerful, strategic distance a genuine psychological punishment that the unmastered cannot possibly endure. Before we begin this profound, necessary inversion of social physics and emotional causality, you must internalize the true hidden cost of your past, unstrategic pursuits, and lock this new, unforgiving operational doctrine into the comments below, a ritual of final commitment. My attention is earned, not given. The first rule, the principle of manufactured scarcity. The first, foundational, and most immediately actionable rule of the reverse chase is the absolute implementation of the principle of manufactured scarcity, which is achieved through the unwavering strategic withdrawal of presence. The unmastered common man operates in the social sphere like a public, easily accessible utility, an endlessly open, predictable resource. He is always available, instantly responsive to any minor prompt, emotionally transparent to a fault, and offering virtually unconditional access to his time, his vulnerable emotional energy, and his endless stream of validation. These individuals are, psychologically and functionally, the equivalent of an unlimited, perpetually available free buffet. They are effortlessly consumed, quickly taken for granted without a second thought, and consequently are utterly devoid of any true, deeply felt or perceived psychological value. The Machiavellian mind, however, understands the core economic and psychological truth that genuine, undeniable value is not primarily derived from an inherent static quality, but is entirely created and amplified through controlled, perceived scarcity and deliberate inaccessibility. Your constant, predictable availability is, without question, your most dangerous, self-sabotaging enemy. Conversely, your calculated strategic absence is your most potent, leverageable psychological weapon. This principle of manufactured scarcity mandates, as an unbending rule, that you must completely transform your time, your companionship, and your critical emotional energy from an imagined infinite supply into a rare, precious, and high-demand commodity. This is the non-verbal declaration that your presence is a resource, and resources must be managed, conserved, and selectively deployed. When you are perpetually there, always replying instantaneously to every minor notification, always initiating the conversation, always bending your carefully curated schedule to meet their fluctuating demands, you instantly devolve into a predictable, inert landscape feature, a psychological constant in their environment that requires absolutely no effort, no strategic thought, and generates zero fear of potential loss. The human mind is fundamentally hardwired through millions of years of evolutionary psychology to fear the prospect of loss, the principle of loss aversion, far more intensely and powerfully than it is wired to value or pursue a potential gain. This loss aversion mechanism is the engine room of the reverse chase. The definitive moment you execute the strategic withdrawal of your presence, you instantaneously activate this primal, paralyzing fear within them. Your resulting absence is not merely an empty void. It is transformed into a strategically deployed, focused, psychological pressure point. It forces the other party to immediately confront the sudden, uncomfortable gap where your reliable presence used to be. A sudden void that triggers profound cognitive dissonance and anxiety, instantly triggering an involuntary, self-initiated process of reappraisal and revaluation. Their internal dialogue shifts abruptly, violently from the dismissive thought, "He is always reliably there, he's a constant," to the anxious, compelling questions, "Where is he? Why is he silent? Has something fundamental changed? Did I fatally miscalculate his true value and potential utility? Is he investing his energy elsewhere, and am I being replaced?" This shift is the core, high-octane engine of the reverse chase. You stop the humiliating process of chasing their low, conditional valuation of you, and you start forcing them, through the undeniable power of their own internal anxiety, to defend your value in their own mind against the sudden, potent, and terrifying perceived threat of your permanent, irretrievable disappearance. The second rule, the command of self-respect. The second absolute and most fundamentally transformative rule of the reverse chase is the total iron-willed command of self-respect, which necessarily mandates the immediate, surgical elimination of all begging behavior. You must understand that begging behavior is not strictly limited to the overt, desperate act of asking. It encompasses every single action that subtly or overtly communicates a perceived low value, a lack of self-containment, or a crippling dependence on the other party's fluctuating approval. This broad category includes compulsively double-texting or attempting to reinitiate contact after having been clearly and deliberately ignored, always, without fail, initiating every single conversation or interaction, creating a power imbalance where they are the permanent recipient, offering long, detailed explanations or elaborate justifications for your feelings when they are obviously dismissed or invalidated, thereby sacrificing dignity for clarity, accepting clearly unacceptable or toxic behavior without imposing an immediate, painful consequence, training them to see you as a target, or most commonly making your entire sense of internal happiness or external stability explicitly and visibly contingent on their unpredictable availability or their volatile mood. These actions, when observed, are powerful, unmistakable psychological signals that scream an undeniable message to the external world. My worth is fluid and entirely negotiable, and I am pathologically dependent on you to validate it and set its price. The definitive moment you are perceived by others as needy or dependent, your perceived value instantaneously plummets because neediness is the ultimate, unmistakable sign of a total lack of emotional autonomy and self-mastery. If you cannot successfully manage and stabilize your own internal state without their constant comforting presence, they instantly understand that they possess total unilateral control over your internal peace and external actions. This realization is their most powerful psychological weapon against you. The reverse chase demands not just an external shift in behavior, but a total, profound internal disarmament of neediness, a psychological re-engineering where your locus of control moves entirely inward. You must forcibly and successfully shift your core psychological dependence from all transient external sources, their fickle love, their sparse text, messages, their conditional validation, back to the internal, self-sufficient fortress of your own unwavering purpose, your own rigorous self-mastery, and your own high-stakes goals. This profound internal shift in focus is the core secret that creates magnetic power. People are not and will never be attracted to desperation, dependency, or emotional chaos. They are instead powerfully and instinctively drawn to preoccupation, purpose, and directed force. They chase what is actively moving away from their grasp, but they chase with exponentially greater intensity what is moving decisively toward something else with an undeniable force and a profound visible purpose. The magnetism of purpose is the only thing that justifies your indifference. The unreadable man never engages in the humiliating act of begging precisely because his internal narrative, his purpose, and his non-negotiable standards have rendered such an action utterly obsolete and unthinkable. He possesses the unshakable knowledge that pleading for another person's attention only serves to psychologically confirm that his attention is worth fundamentally less than theirs. Instead of pleading, he enforces a rigid, non-negotiable system of consequence and disciplined reciprocity. If they choose to withdraw their effort, he instantly, cleanly, and predictably withdraws his access, not as a cheap, volatile, emotional manipulation, but as a natural, logical, and inevitable consequence of their poor valuation and unstrategic behavior. The powerful, sudden absence of your expected begging instantly forces them into a profound, uncomfortable psychological vacuum. Their predictive models expected you to chase, to plead, to explain yourself, and to panic. When you simply, cleanly, and silently vanish, continuing instead to focus with singular intensity on the elevation of your own purpose, they are immediately forced to deal with the destabilizing discomfort of their own shattered expectations. This discomfort, this cognitive dissonance, translates directly into the powerful, primal impulse to chase and reclaim the source of the indifference. This is the critical juncture where Machiavelli's insight on the utility of fear and love is most applicable in the personal, high-stakes realm. You are not seeking to inspire raw hatred, but to cultivate a profound, absolute respect born from the terrifying, certain awareness that you possess the absolute, non-transferable autonomy to walk away from the entire dynamic without a second thought. If your self-respect, your purpose, or your time is fundamentally threatened, the elimination of all forms of begging behavior is the surgical elimination of their primary, most effective leverage point, thereby successfully transforming your attention into a reward they must actively and continuously re-earn, rather than a freely available, easily consumed service they were entitled to. The refusal to chase is the public demonstration that you are self-sufficient, and self-sufficiency is the core of all power. The third rule, the leverage of future projection. The third, most advanced and strategically devastating rule of the reverse chase is the application of the leverage of future projection, which is entirely achieved through the state of absolute, profound indifference to closure. The unmastered, common man is pathologically compelled to chase the elusive concept of closure, the overwhelming, desperate psychological need for a final, validating conversation, a definitive, tidy explanation, or a neat, psychologically satisfying ending to justify their feelings and make the entire narrative complete and palatable. This compulsive, exhausting pursuit of closure is a fatal weakness because it structurally ties your entire present internal peace to a fixed event in the past and grants the other party the unilateral power to hold your entire future emotional state hostage until they deign to provide the low-value answers you seek. The Machiavellian mind understands, with cold analytical clarity, that closure is nothing more than a psychological myth. It is a dangerous, debilitating emotional sedative that actively prevents necessary forward movement and paralyzes action. The unreadable man absolutely refuses to seek or demand it, and in doing so, perfectly flips the entire psychological burden of ambiguity onto the one who initiated the withdrawal or the misbehavior. When you successfully refuse to chase closure, two powerful, compounding psychological phenomena are instantly triggered. First, you maintain an active, unsettling, and highly magnetic presence in their active thought process. By leaving the situation professionally, cleanly, and definitively ambiguous, you successfully force them to be the ones to supply the entire narrative for your silent absence. Their mind, which is psychologically repelled by and fundamentally hates ambiguity, immediately begins to create powerful, often wildly flattering, and highly anxious projections about your supposed success, your new, mysterious life, and the high-value, compelling reasons why you left the dynamic so effortlessly and cleanly. They begin to frantically wonder, is he massively thriving now? Did he instantly find someone or something dramatically better? Did I make a strategic mistake of colossal proportions by letting him go? His silence implies not sadness, but power. This speculation, driven by anxiety, is the core of the projection leverage. Second, you trigger the powerful, compulsive Zeigarnik effect, the well-established psychological principles stating that the human mind remembers and is compelled by the magnetic force of incomplete tasks and open loops far more powerfully and intensely than it values or remembers completed, closed ones. Your relationship, your final conversation, or your last charged interaction remains an open loop in their cognitive process, an unfinished, unresolved task that demands the consumption of their continued cognitive resources and mental bandwidth. This strong cognitive compulsion to finally complete the loop translates, almost universally, into the overwhelming impulse to reach out, to check in, or to anxiously re-establish contact, not strictly out of pure, genuine love or affection, but out of a deep-seated, painful cognitive need for completion that only your presence or your definitive answer can possibly satisfy. This effect ensures that your absence is a perpetual, low-level irritant in their daily thoughts, compelling them back toward you. The leverage of future projection is not about engaging in a shallow, pretend effort to move on. It is about genuinely, irrevocably, and demonstrably shifting your entire life's focus to a future trajectory that is so ambitious, so compelling, and so profoundly self-contained that their past utility and their past narrative become genuinely, structurally irrelevant to your present. This is the critical juncture where your purpose and your silent fortress, as detailed in the preceding script, become your single greatest, most potent, and leverageable tools. The precise moment they realize with chilling certainty that you are not in any way waiting for them, you are not passively hoping for reconciliation, and you have entirely rebuilt the scaffolding of your life without the need for their narrative input, they will experience profound, destabilizing panic. This unwavering, profound indifference to closure is the highest form of respect for your own finite time, your mental sovereignty, and your life's singular mission. You deliberately deny them the final, satisfying, controlling curtain call, leaving them instead with the unsettling, open-ended, and compelling question of your future power and ultimate trajectory. You are not a disposable chapter to be closed and shelved. You are a monumental, undeniable force of nature that simply and definitively changed its course. The result is that your potential reappearance, or lack thereof, becomes a subject of intense, desperate, and compelling anticipation in their active thought process, transferring the entire emotional cost of the ambiguity onto them. The strategy of the reverse chase is not a cheap, low-level trick of manipulation designed for emotional games. It is, at its core, a profound, necessary restoration of natural psychological balance in all interpersonal dynamics, where true, measurable value is earned through effort, not begged for through desperation. It is the sophisticated, calculated, and high-level tactical decision to deliberately leverage the foundational principles of human nature, including the fear of loss, the compulsion for cognitive completion, and the primal desire for scarcity, entirely in your favor, thereby maximizing your personal control and leverage. You must internalize these three immutable rules and execute them with the cold, disciplined, analytical logic of a seasoned military strategist, never with the volatile, predictable passion of an emotional supplicant. Manufacture scarcity by meticulously controlling the supply and timing of your presence. Command self-respect by surgically eliminating all visible begging or needy behavior, and leverage future projection by demonstrating an absolute, unshakable indifference to closure. The predictable, frantic, and exhausting chase is the low-value currency of the weak, the unmastered, and the dependent. The strategic, profound, and magnetic stillness of the reverse. Chase is the ultimate high-value currency of the unreadable man. You must internalize this final, self-defining truth. You are not a service to be cheaply consumed. You are an insurmountable challenge to be conquered. When you decisively stop chasing, you instantaneously compel the entire world around you to ask itself, with dawning internal panic, what of immense value it has just lost. The power of your silence and the force of your strategic withdrawal speaks infinitely louder than any demand or plea you could ever shout. You are not the chaser. You are, by force of your own self-mastery, the prize.